This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good morning, everyone. Bruchim Habayim. Welcome to our Friday morning series of Shiurim. This morning, Be'ezras Hashem, B'siyanta D'Shmaya, we have 3 Shiurim on schedule. Shiur number 1 is 5 electrifying Divrei Torah on the Parsha and how to see it in print. So we go to our site, rabbidg.com, and if you want to see the Divrei Torah, you could go to our site. Please subscribe to our Divrei Torah. It will come to your inbox every Erev Shabbos. By the way, if anybody wants to be on any of the WhatsApp groups to receive the weekly shiurim, not only from this year but from past years, you could sign up here on our site, rabbidg.com, and our good friend Rav Gedalia Schwartz will inundate you with many shiurim on the Parsha. This way, wherever you are, you're in the car, you're on the go, you could choose a shiur, a longer one or shorter one. Okay, so first we're going to start with the Divrei Torah in English. Elevate your Shabbos table, Parshas Chayei Sarah, and we thank Rabbi Aaron Subar for uploading the Divrei Torah. The Elevate Your Shabbos table is brought to you by the Levitan family. There's a transcription of earlier years of Shiurim, and we're going to do one Dvar Torah from the English, the amazing thought of the Meshech Chachma. The Chazal infer from the fact that it says that they buried Avraham, who's they? Yitzchak and Ishmael buried Avraham. From here, Chazal derive that Ishmael did Shuvah. The fact that he let Yitzchak go first, that indicates that Ishmael repented. So the Meshech Chachma asks, how does the fact that Ishmael offered Yitzchak the courtesy of, so to speak, walking first, how does that demonstrate that he in fact did teshuvah? And the Meshech Chachma explains as follows. Ishmael was present when Sarah was told, V'hinei ben l'Sarah ishtecha v'Sarah shaymas pesach ha'oil v'hu acharav. It says v'hu acharav, and he was after it. Rashi learns v'hu acharav is going on the door, meaning the door was behind him. However, Targum Yonasan ben Uziel and the Medrash Rabbah say v'hu acharav was going on Yishmael. In other words, Yishmael was behind the door and he heard the prophecy. Why is this referring to Ishmael? Because earlier on, Avraham sent the nar to prepare the food, and Rashi says this was Ishmael. So Ishmael was the last unidentified person in the story. Therefore, when it says v'hu acharav, it's going on Ishmael. Later on, the Torah says that Ishmael was mitzachek. Now Rashi learns mitzachek was he was committing avodah zarah, gilui arayah, shvichas damim. The Sforno learns he was laughing because at the Suda, where they celebrated Yitzchak being weaned, Yishmael was mocking the fact that people thought that Yitzchak was the son of Avraham, because he was basically saying Yitzchak is not Avraham's son. May Avimelech nisabra Sarah. Sarah came from Avimelech. And Yishmael's sin was he joined the late Sanei Hadar, saying May Avimelech nisabra Sarah. So according to Sefarno, the mitzachek of Yishmael was denying the legitimacy of Yitzchak Avinu. So by allowing Yitzchak to go and walk first and to bury Yaakov Avinu, to bury Avraham Avinu first, he was basically doing teshuvah and acknowledging the legitimacy of Yitzchak as a heir of Avraham Avinu. Okay, now I want to share with you something from the holy Ben La'ashri. The Ben La'ashri, his name was Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen Huberman, the tzaddik of Ranana, who offers quite an amazing havtacha that anyone who says over his Divrei Torah in his name, he will pray for you, he'll bail you out of any tzara in this world, in the next world. He was a chavrusa of my great-grandfather in Sachachav, and my grandfather, Zechatzak Lebracha, corresponded with, he was a very poor man. He basically cannot afford even regular paper, and he never was a zeicha to children. And this sefer, so to speak, is his legacy. So I'll share with you a few thoughts. Number one, Chazal tell us that Rabbi Akiva was giving a drasha, and his Talmidim wanted, they were falling asleep, they were dozing off, and he wanted to wake them up. So he said, why was Esther Zocha to rule over 127 Medinos in the merit of her righteous ancestress, Sarah, who lived 127 righteous years? Says the Tzaddik Ranana, what exactly was the wake-up call over here? Why were his Talmidim falling asleep? He explains as follows. People usually doze off, they fall asleep, if they're downtrodden, if they're miyuash, if they're despondent, if they're in a state of depression. And this was in the aftermath of the Churban and the Talmidei of Rabbi Akiva, who saw the devastation of the Mikdash and of Klal Yisrael. They were in a very morose and depressed state. And Rabbi Akiva wanted to be mechazik them. And he said as follows. Esther ruled over 127 Medinos in the merit of Sarah. But wait a second. Sarah lived 127 righteous years? I mean, her early years, what exactly was she doing when she was 2 years old? She was running Tomchei Shabbos of Mesopotamia when she was 2.5. So why was she rewarded for 127 years? The answer is, if somebody acts properly at the end of their life, it is a redeeming quality for their entire lifetime. So too, my dear Talmidim, you may have started off in years of disaster for the Jewish people, but if you're mechazik yourself, and you try your best to rebuild your families and rebuild Klal Yisrael, not only will that breathe life into the remaining years of your life, but that will also give meaning to the original years, your early years of suffering. And this is something we learned from the lifetime of Sarah Imenu. And this was how Rabbi Akiva would try to wake up his Talmidim. The Ben Lo Ashri continues. He says, we know that the word Vayihu could be read the same forward and backward. Vav Yud Hey Yud Vav. It could be read the same forward and backward. This is Merames, that tzaddikim, even in their death, they're called alive. This indicates that Sarah, whether from beginning to end, or from end to beginning, both when she came into the world and when she left the world, Chayei Sarah, she was alive. She was living, both in the beginning and in the end. She was always begeder Chayim. Now, here's another offering from the holy Tzaddik Ranana. He says, that Vayiu Chayei Sarah, the Mefarshim say, the Baal Turim points out, the Chida points out, that the word Vayihu is Gematria 37. Because in fact, the main life of Sarah Imenu was 37 years. Because from the time she had a child until she expired, that was 37 years, from age 90 to age 127. Vayihu Chayei Sarah. Nevertheless, Rashi comments on the concluding words of this pasuk, Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah, which Rashi says means Kulan Shavin L'Toiva. They're all equally good. Why does the Torah have to repeat Kulan Shavin L'Toiva? The point being, because you might mistakenly think, Vayiyu, the only real life of Sarah Imenu was when she had a child. The last 37 years of her life. And perhaps the other part of her life, it wasn't really Shavin L'Taiva. She suffered. She was barren. She was childless. She was abducted by Paroi. Maybe her happiness and well-being was only Vayihu. And therefore the Torah says no. As a tzaddikas, who her main progeny were her good deeds, all 127 years were equally fulfilling, equally accomplished, equally years of happiness. Despite Vayiyu, despite the fact she only enjoyed children for 37 years, nevertheless, Kulan Shavin L'Toiva, says the tzaddik of Ranana. Now, another interesting idea, Kiryas Arba. The Rishonim offer many Perushim, why it's called Kiryas Arba. 4 giants live there, 4 Zugos were buried there. The Ben Lashri suggests that we know that a kever, a grave, only occupies Daled Amos by Daled Amos. And therefore, since Kiryas Arba, Hebron, is designated for Kevarim, actually, Hebron is one of my favorite cities in the world. It's one of the 4 holy cities. And of course, aside from being the city of the resting place of the Avos HaKadoshim, it's also, you have there the kever of Yishai and Rus, and a number of Gedolim are buried in Hebron. You have the Chesed Li Avraham, the Chida's great-grandfather. You have the Reishis Chachma, Rabbi Eliyahu Dividas, the Stei Chemed, the Melech Shloimeh, all Gedolim buried in the holy city of Hebron. And on Parshas Chayei Sarah, of course, many thousands of Jews, they go to visit Kever Avoseinu in Hebron. The reason it's called Kiryas Arba is because since a Kever occupies Daled Amos by Daled Amos, therefore it's called the city of 4, the city of Kvarim, B'lashon Nikia, the city of Daled Amos by Daled Amos. Now, I want to share with you one more amazing thought. And that is, on the pasuk, Vayakam Avraham E'al Pnei Mesai, Avraham got up from upon the face of his dead. What does this mean, Avraham got up from upon the face of his dead? Earlier on, the pasuk says, Vayakam Sedei Ephraim, the field of Ephraim got up. Rashi says, Tekuma Hisalai, it had an aliyah, it had an elevation, that it left the Rishus, it left the domain of a simple person and it went to the domain of a king. So too, says the Tzaddik Ranana, Vayakam Avraham, Avraham had an aliyah. Why did he have an aliyah? He had an aliyah by looking at the face of Sarah. Namely, even though the simple reading of Rashi is that Sarah died because she heard that Yitzchak Avinu was almost shechted, the language of Rashi is Kemat Sheloi Nishchat. He almost was not shechted, which literally reads, she died because she thought he was not shechted. And the Sfarim tell us that the Tzaddikas Sarah, she indicted herself that she was not Zoicha, that Yitzchak Avinu should be a carbon. And she died not because she thought he was shechted, but because she thought it was her fault that she was not Zoicha to have a son who would be a carbon. And that's why she died. And that righteousness and that holiness, by the way, the Ben Lashi writes in an earlier piece, that she indicted herself that was her punishment, that she laughed, and therefore she wasn't Zoicha to have such a child who's a carbon. That indictment of herself, that holy questioning of herself, tzaddikim always challenge themselves. They always feel that they're not worthy, that they could have done more. And it's that holiness was witnessed by Avraham Avinu, and Avraham Avinu looked at her face, and Avraham Avinu sees on her face the kedusha, that she felt that she herself was not zoicha to the Akedah, and because of that, Avraham Avinu had an aliyah looking at her. Vayakam Avraham, Avraham had a tukuma, had an aliyah, me'al pnei mesai, by looking at the holy face of Sarah Imenu, and it was ma'irer Avraham to tshuva shlema. Okay, these are 5 ideas on the Parsha. Thank you for joining. We're going to now move on to our second segment.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.